The garage smelled like motor oil and broken dreams. I was elbow deep in the engine of my '92 Mustang when I heard Vanessa's voice drifting through the thin walls. That laugh, the one that used to make my heart skip, now made my stomach turn. Too sweet, too intimate, too damn familiar. "Oh, Eric, you're so bad," she giggled into her phone. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Eric? I knew that name. Her coworker at Morrison & Associates. The guy with the perfect teeth and the BMW who showed up to our barbecue last month wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. I wiped my hands on an old rag and checked my watch. 11:30 p.m. What kind of work call required that much laughter at this hour? Unless they were discussing the hilarious intricacies of contract law, something wasn't adding up. The garage door creaked as I pushed it open. Vanessa was pacing in our kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, her back to me. She'd changed out of her work clothes into that black silk nightgown, the one she used to wear for me. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," she whispered. "Same place?" My blood went cold. "Same place? What place?" She spun around, nearly dropping her phone when she saw me. "Oh, honey, you scared me." Her voice shifted, becoming artificially bright. "I was just talking to Jennifer about the Henderson case." Jennifer. Right. Because Jennifer was suddenly named Eric and had developed a distinctly masculine voice. "Working late again?" I asked, forcing a smile. "You know how it is. Big cases, big money." She shrugged, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed." I watched her disappear upstairs, her silk nightgown catching the hallway light. 22 years of marriage, and I'd never seen her lie so badly. Or maybe I'd just never been paying attention. The next morning, I was nursing my second cup of coffee when Vanessa waltzed into the kitchen with a glow that had nothing to do with her expensive skincare routine. She was practically bouncing on her toes. "David," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I have news." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small white stick. A pregnancy test. 2 pink lines stared back at me like a neon sign advertising my stupidity. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her smile stretching from ear to ear. "Congratulations, Daddy. Get your bank account ready, because this baby's going to need everything." I stared at the test, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The math wasn't adding up. We'd barely touched each other in months. The last time we'd been intimate was... when? 3 months ago? 4? "What a surprise," I said, my voice flat. "Aren't you excited?" Her smile faltered slightly. "We're going to have a baby, David. At 44, you're going to be a father again." Emma, our 18-year-old daughter, was already in college. The idea of starting over with diapers and sleepless nights should have terrified me. Instead, all I felt was a cold, creeping suspicion. "How far along?" I asked. "About 8 weeks, according to my calculations." She stood up, smoothing down her skirt. "I already made an appointment with Dr. Martinez for next week." 8 weeks. I pulled out my phone and checked my calendar. 8 weeks ago, I'd been in Detroit for a week-long training conference. A conference Vanessa had insisted I attend, even though I'd wanted to skip it. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, standing up and kissing her cheek. Her perfume smelled different. Expensive. Not the drugstore brand she usually wore. After she left for work, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the pregnancy test. The house felt different somehow. Smaller. Like the walls were closing in. I walked to Vanessa's home office, the room she'd claimed as her sanctuary 2 years ago. Her desk was immaculate, as always, bills organized in neat stacks, her laptop closed and charging. But something caught my eye. A receipt, barely visible under her keyboard. Luxury car rental. A Mercedes, rented for 3 days last week. While I was driving my beat-up truck to work, my pregnant wife was cruising around town in a car that cost more than I made in 6 months. And there, draped over the back of her chair, was a silk scarf I'd never seen before. Red and gold, with a designer label. The kind of thing a man might buy for his mistress. My hand shook as I picked it up. It smelled like cologne, expensive cologne, not the Old Spice I'd been wearing for 20 years. I sank into her chair, the scarf still in my hands. 22 years of marriage. 22 years of working my ass off at the construction company while she built her career. 22 years of believing we were a team. The pregnancy test sat on the desk, mocking me with its pink lines. A baby. My baby. Except the math didn't work, the timing was wrong, and my wife was wearing perfume that cost more than my monthly beer budget. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in the empty house. Because what else could I do? My wife was pregnant with another man's child and she expected me to pay for it. What a surprise, I said again, this time with genuine amusement. The game was just beginning. Doug's bar wasn't much to look at. A dive with sticky floors and neon beer signs that had seen better decades. But it was honest, unlike everything else in my life lately. I'd been coming here since high school, back when Doug was still wearing a police uniform instead of serving drinks. You look like hell, Doug said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. Let me guess. Vanessa? She's pregnant. I took a long pull from the bottle. The beer was cold and bitter, like my mood. Doug's eyebrows shot up. Congratulations? Or should I say condolences? The baby isn't mine. The words hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Doug stopped wiping down glasses and gave me his full attention. 25 years as a cop had taught him when to listen. You sure about that? I was in Detroit when it was conceived. Haven't exactly been active in the bedroom department lately. I peeled the label off my beer bottle. Found a car rental receipt and a scarf that smells like another man. Shit, Dave, I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm actually finding this whole thing fascinating, like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Doug poured himself a shot of whiskey. So what's your plan? Haven't decided yet, but I'm thinking chess, not checkers. Good man. You want my advice? Document everything. Photos, receipts, times, dates. If this goes to court, you'll need ammunition. I nodded, already mentally cataloging the evidence. The scarf, the receipt, the mysterious phone calls. But I needed more. I needed to catch them in the act. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Vanessa announced she was having dinner with her friend Jennifer to discuss girl stuff. She spent an hour getting ready, applying makeup with the precision of a surgeon. The black dress she chose was new, tags still attached when I'd seen it hanging in her closet. Don't wait up, she said, kissing my cheek. You know how Jennifer and I get when we start talking. Have fun, I said, already reaching for my keys. Following your wife isn't as easy as they make it look in movies. Vanessa drove like she was late for her own funeral, weaving through traffic in her silver Honda. I stayed 3 cars back, my heart pounding like a teenager's on his first date. She didn't go to Jennifer's house. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Motel, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. The neon sign flickered vacancy in pink letters that reflected off the puddles in the cracked asphalt. I parked across the street and waited. 5 minutes later, a black BMW pulled up. Eric stepped out, straightening his tie and checking his reflection in the car window. He was younger than me, maybe 35, with the kind of gym-sculpted body that screamed, "I have too much time and money." They met at the door of room 237. The kiss they shared wasn't the polite peck of coworkers. It was hungry, desperate, the kind of kiss that said they'd been thinking about this all day. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The angle was perfect. I could see both their faces clearly. Eric's hand was already sliding up Vanessa's thigh as she fumbled with the room key. They disappeared inside, and I sat in my truck, staring at the photos on my phone. My wife of 22 years, pregnant with another man's child, playing house in a sleazy motel room. I should have been angry. I should have been heartbroken. Instead, I felt relieved. The uncertainty was over. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. An hour later, they emerged from the room. Vanessa's hair was mussed, her lipstick gone. Eric was grinning like a kid who'd just gotten away with stealing candy. They kissed again, longer this time, before walking to their separate cars. That's when Eric noticed me. Our eyes met across the parking lot. Instead of looking guilty or embarrassed, he smirked. Actually smirked. Then he had the balls to wave at me, like we were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. My vision went red. I was out of my truck before I realized I was moving, my feet crunching across the broken asphalt. Eric was still standing by his BMW, that smug smile plastered across his face. "Dave, right?" he said, like we were meeting at a cocktail party. "Fancy seeing you here." "Fancy that," I replied, pulling out my box cutter. His smile faltered when he saw the blade. "Hey man, let's talk about this." I walked past him to his car and slashed all 4 tires. The hiss of escaping air was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. "What the hell?" Eric jumped back, his face going pale. "You can't just—" "If you're going to ride my wife," I said, folding the box cutter and putting it back in my pocket, "you can walk home." I pulled a piece of paper from my wallet and tucked it under his windshield wiper. I'd written it that morning, just in case. "Hope your night was as flat as your tires. D." The security camera mounted on the motel office blinked its red light at me. I looked directly into it and smiled, giving it a little wave. Let them have their evidence. I was just getting started. Eric was still sputtering when I walked back to my truck. "This isn't over," he called after me. "No," I agreed, starting the engine. "It's not." Vanessa came home that night with a story about Jennifer's car breaking down and having to call a cab. She was a better lawyer than she was a liar, but I played along, nodding sympathetically while she spun her tale. "Poor Jennifer," I said. "Car trouble is the worst." "Mm-hmm." Vanessa wasn't really listening. She was checking her phone, probably waiting for a text from Eric about his tire situation. Over the next few weeks, I watched my wife transform. She started wearing makeup to bed, claiming it was good for her skin. She bought new lingerie, not for me, obviously, since we hadn't been intimate since the pregnancy announcement. She took longer showers and started going to yoga classes that somehow lasted 3 hours. "Prenatal yoga," she explained when I asked about the extended sessions. "Very important for the baby's development." "Of course," I agreed. "Wouldn't want to neglect the baby's development." The first public appearance of Eric the coworker came at our daughter Emma's birthday dinner. Vanessa had insisted we celebrate at Romano's, the fancy Italian place downtown where appetizers cost more than my lunch budget for a week. "I hope you don't mind," Vanessa said as we waited for our table, "but I invited Eric from work. He's new in town and doesn't know many people." "The more the merrier," I replied, though inside I was calculating how much it would cost to bail myself out of jail for assault. Eric arrived 20 minutes late, making a grand entrance in his perfectly pressed suit. He was the kind of guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement, all sharp angles and practiced charm. "Dave?" he said, extending his hand like we were old friends. "So good to see you again." Again. As if our last meeting hadn't involved me destroying his tires in a motel parking lot. I shook his hand, squeezing just a little too hard. Eric. What a surprise. Dinner was a performance worthy of Broadway. Vanessa hung on Eric's every word while he regaled us with stories of his success in corporate law. He drove a BMW, lived in a downtown loft, and had apparently never met a mirror he didn't like. You know, Dave, Eric said, cutting into his $40 steak. Vanessa tells me you work construction. That must be fulfilling. The way he said construction made it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. Very fulfilling, I agreed. I build things that last. Unlike some professions where you just push paper around and bill people for it. Emma kicked me under the table. She could sense the tension even if she didn't understand it. Dad builds amazing things, she said loyally. He renovated our entire kitchen last year. How handy, Eric said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The evening got worse from there. Eric somehow knew details about Emma's college plans that I didn't. He complimented Vanessa's pregnancy glow while looking at her like she was dessert. And when the check came, he insisted on paying for everyone. My treat, he said, pulling out a platinum credit card. After all, we're celebrating new beginnings, right? In the parking lot, Eric walked us to our car while making small talk about the weather. When Vanessa hugged him goodbye, his hand lingered on her lower back just a second too long. See you Monday, Nessa, he said, using a nickname I'd never heard before. Looking forward to it, she replied, her cheeks flushed. The drive home was silent except for Emma's chatter about her upcoming finals. Vanessa stared out the window, probably thinking about Eric's hands on her back. I focused on driving and planning my next move. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, and Vanessa was reading in the living room, though I noticed she never turned any pages, I went to my workshop in the basement. I had thinking to do, and I always thought better with tools in my hands. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I recognized the arrogance immediately. Enjoy dinner. Your wife has excellent taste. E. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, in restaurants, maybe. In men, clearly not. D. His response came quickly. We'll see about that. I set the phone aside and picked up a piece of sandpaper. I had a lot of rough edges to smooth out, and not all of them were on the wood I was working with. 3 days later, I got my chance for round 2. Doug's Bar was hosting its monthly trivia night, and somehow Vanessa had convinced me to attend with some friends from work. I should have known Eric would be there, holding court at a corner table like he owned the place. The team consisted of me, Vanessa, Eric, and Jennifer. The real Jennifer this time, not the imaginary one Vanessa used as an alibi. Jennifer was a nice enough woman, a paralegal at Vanessa's firm, who clearly had no idea she was being used as cover for an affair. Eric had positioned himself as the team captain, despite the fact that his knowledge seemed limited to corporate law and expensive wine. When the sports questions came up, he looked at me expectantly. You must know about football, Dave, he said. Blue-collar guys love their sports, right? Some do, I replied. Others prefer more intellectual pursuits, like reading. Oh, you read? Eric's surprise was insulting. What kind of books? Currently working through Machiavelli's The Prince, I said. Fascinating study of power dynamics and strategic thinking. Eric's smile faltered slightly. Score 1 for the blue-collar guy. The evening progressed with Eric becoming increasingly obnoxious. He ordered expensive whiskey for the table without asking what anyone wanted. He name-dropped clients and bragged about his latest legal victories. And he kept finding excuses to touch Vanessa, adjusting her chair, brushing imaginary lint off her shoulder, placing his hand on her arm when he talked. The breaking point came during the final round. The question was about construction techniques in Roman architecture. I knew the answer immediately, but before I could speak, Eric cut me off. Dave might know this one, he said with a condescending smile. After all, he's in construction, though I suppose Roman architecture might be a bit advanced. That's when I snapped. I stood up and picked up my full beer, a heavy glass mug that Doug kept for special occasions. Eric was still talking, something about aqueducts, when I accidentally tripped over my chair. The entire contents of the mug went straight into Eric's lap, soaking his expensive pants and spreading across the table. "Oops," I said, steadying myself. "Hope the dry cleaner can get beer out of wool, though I suppose expensive pants might be a bit advanced for most cleaners." Eric jumped up, beer dripping from his clothes, his face red with rage. "You did that on purpose." "Did I? How clumsy of me." I shrugged. Guess us construction guys don't have the refined motor skills of lawyers. "You son of a bitch!" Eric lunged at me, his fists raised. I was ready for him. 20 years of construction work had kept me in better shape than his gym membership. When he swung, I ducked and came up with an open-handed slap that cracked across his cheek like a gunshot. The bar went silent. Eric staggered backward, his hand pressed to his face, shock replacing anger in his eyes. "Next time you want to discuss my education level," I said calmly, "remember that I'm smart enough not to mess with another man's wife in public." Doug appeared beside us, his bouncer instincts kicking in. "Gentlemen, I think it's time for you both to leave." "Gladly," I said, pulling out my wallet and dropping money on the table. "Sorry about the mess, Doug." As I walked toward the door, I heard Vanessa calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I'd said what I needed to say, and Eric's red cheek was proof that the message had been received. Outside in the parking lot, Eric caught up with me, his expensive suit wrinkled and beer-stained. "This isn't over, Dave," he said, trying to salvage some dignity. "No," I agreed, getting into my truck. "It's just beginning." The DNA test was easier to arrange than I'd expected. My buddy Mike worked at the county hospital lab, and for a case of beer and a promise to help him move his couch, he agreed to run an unofficial test. "Just need a sample from both potential fathers," Mike explained over coffee. "Hair with the root, saliva, whatever you can get." Getting my own sample was simple enough. Eric's was trickier, but opportunity presented itself when Vanessa invited him to another family dinner, this time at our house. "I thought it would be nice to have Eric over for a home-cooked meal," she said, bustling around our kitchen like Martha Stewart on speed. "He's been working so hard lately." "How thoughtful," I replied, watching her prepare enough food for a small army. "I'll make sure to give him a proper welcome." Eric arrived fashionably late, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly cable bill. He dressed down for the occasion, khakis and a polo shirt instead of his usual suit, but he still looked like he was posing for a country club brochure. "Dave, my man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old buddies. "Thanks for having me over." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, noting how his hand lingered on Vanessa's waist when he hugged her hello. Dinner was another performance, with Eric playing the charming guest and Vanessa the devoted hostess. They had inside jokes about work, shared glances across the table, and a chemistry that was impossible to miss. If I hadn't already known about their affair, it would have been obvious from watching them together. My opportunity came when Eric excused himself to use the bathroom. I followed him upstairs, waiting in the hallway until I heard the toilet flush. When he opened the door, I was standing right there. "Jesus, Dave, you scared me." "Sorry," I said, not sorry at all. "Just wanted to show you something." I led him to my home office, the room where I kept my awards from the construction company, photos of projects I'd completed, evidence of the career Eric seemed to find so amusing. "Impressive," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. He was examining a photo of a shopping center I'd helped build when I made my move. "Check this out," I said, pointing to a framed certificate on the wall. As he leaned in to read it, I carefully plucked a hair from the back of his head. He was so focused on trying to look interested that he didn't notice. "Safety Excellence Award," he read aloud. "That's nice." 25 years without a major accident, I said, slipping the hair into my pocket. "Takes skill to build things without destroying them." "I'm sure it does," Eric replied, his attention already drifting back toward the stairs and Vanessa. 2 weeks later, Mike called with the results. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Should I be?" "The baby isn't yours, Dave. Not even close. Different blood type, different genetic markers. Whoever the father is, it's definitely not you." I thanked Mike and hung up, staring at the official-looking document he'd promised to mail me. After 22 years of marriage, my wife was pregnant with another man's child and expecting me to pay for it. The funny thing was, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was liberated. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where I stood and what I needed to do. That evening, Vanessa was in her usual spot on the couch, laptop open, working, late again. She'd been having a lot of late-night video conferences lately, though I noticed she always took them in the bedroom with the door closed. "How was your day?" she asked without looking up from her screen. "Enlightening," I said, settling into my recliner with a beer. "I learned something interesting today." "Oh, what's that?" "Did you know that vasectomies are nearly 100% effective?" Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. "What?" "Vasectomies. Male sterilization. Very reliable form of birth control." I took a sip of my beer, enjoying the moment. I was reading an article about it. Fascinating stuff. Vanessa's face had gone pale. Why were you reading about that?" "Just curious. You know how it is when you're expecting a baby. You start thinking about family planning, birth control, that sort of thing." She closed the laptop with shaking hands. "David, what are you trying to say?" "I'm not trying to say anything, honey. I'm saying it directly." I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the DNA test results, unfolding them slowly. "The baby you're carrying isn't mine." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "I had a vasectomy 7 years ago," I continued conversationally. "Right after Emma started high school, remember? I told you I was having a minor procedure done. You were so busy with that big case you barely noticed." "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I? Check with Dr. Peterson if you want. He's got all the paperwork." I folded the DNA results and put them back in my pocket. The question is, what are we going to do about this situation? Vanessa stood up abruptly, her laptop sliding to the floor. "This is insane. You're being paranoid and—" "Paranoid?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Honey, I've seen the motel receipts. I've got photos of you and Eric playing tonsil hockey in the Riverside parking lot. I've watched him feel you up at family dinners. The only thing I was paranoid about was my own sanity." She sank back onto the couch, all the fight going out of her. "David, I can explain—" "I'm sure you can. You're a lawyer. Explaining things is what you do." I finished my beer and stood up. "But here's the thing, Vanessa. I don't want to hear it. I'm done with explanations and excuses and lies." "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I want you to call Eric and tell him the good news. He's going to be a daddy. Hope he's ready to get his bank account ready because this baby's going to need everything." I headed toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at her. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks like black rain. "Oh, and Vanessa? You might want to start looking for a new place to live. This house is in my name, remember? Wedding gift from my parents." Her sobs followed me up the stairs, but I felt lighter with each step. The truth was finally out, and the real game was about to begin. Word travels fast in a small town, especially when it involves scandal. Within a week of my confrontation with Vanessa, half the neighborhood knew about the affair. The other half was pretending they didn't know while gossiping about it behind closed doors. Vanessa tried to maintain her dignity, but cracks were showing. She'd moved into the guest bedroom, temporarily, and was spending even more time at the office. Eric, meanwhile, seemed to have developed a case of cold feet. His BMW hadn't been parked at our house since the night I revealed the DNA results. I was enjoying my morning coffee when my daughter Emma called from college. "Dad, What the hell is going on? She demanded without preamble. Sarah Martinez says her mom heard you and Mom are getting divorced because she's pregnant with some other guy's baby. I sighed. Sarah's mom was the neighborhood gossip queen. It's complicated, sweetheart. Complicated how? Is Mom really having an affair? There was no point in lying to her. Emma was 18, not 8. Yes. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Emma, you still there? I'm here. Her voice was small, hurt. Is the baby really not yours? No, it's not. Jesus, Dad. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, honey. None of this is your fault. But what about Mom? What about the family? Your mom made her choices. Now we all have to live with the consequences. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen, thinking about consequences. Vanessa was about to learn that actions have them, and Eric was going to discover that playing with other men's wives wasn't the victimless crime he'd thought it was. My first move was financial. 22 years of marriage meant joint accounts, shared credit cards, and intertwined assets. But I'd been smart about a few things. The house was in my name, inherited from my parents. My construction company retirement account was separate, and I'd been squirreling away cash in a personal account for years, money Vanessa didn't know about. I started small, canceled her credit cards, citing suspicious activity, transferred money from our joint savings into my personal account, changed the passwords on all our shared accounts. Legal? Absolutely. Ethical? Debatable? Satisfying? Completely. Vanessa noticed immediately. My card was declined at lunch today, she said that evening, storming into the living room where I was watching the news. And I can't access our savings account online. Huh, that's weird. I didn't look away from the television. Maybe you should call the bank. I did call the bank. They said you made changes to the accounts. Oh, right. Security precaution. With all the identity theft these days, I thought it was smart to limit access. David, this is ridiculous. I need access to our money. Our money? I finally looked at her. Interesting choice of words. How much of our money were you planning to spend on your boyfriend's baby? Her face flushed red. That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, turning off the TV. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've been working 60-hour weeks to support a family while you've been screwing around with a trust fund lawyer? Is it fair that you're carrying another man's child and expecting me to pay for it? Is it fair that you've made me look like a fool in front of our friends and neighbors? I never meant for this to happen, she said, tears starting to flow again. But it did happen, and now we're both dealing with the consequences. The next phase of my plan involved Eric's professional life. I'd done some research and discovered that Morrison and Associates had strict policies about workplace relationships. More importantly, they had even stricter policies about partners sleeping with married colleagues. I crafted my anonymous email carefully, attaching the photos I'd taken at the motel along with a detailed timeline of the affair. I sent it to the senior partners, the human resources director, and the office manager. Then I sat back and waited. Eric called me 2 days later, his voice shaking with rage. You son of a bitch, what did you do? I'm sorry, who is this? I asked innocently. You know damn well who this is. I'm suspended pending investigation because of your little email. What email? I don't know what you're talking about. The photos, Dave, the timeline, the whole goddamn report about me and Vanessa. Oh, that email. Yeah, I might have sent that. I was enjoying this conversation more than I probably should have. Funny thing about workplace affairs, Eric. Companies don't like them. Bad for morale, potential lawsuits, that sort of thing. You're destroying my career. No, you destroyed your career when you decided to sleep with a married colleague. I just documented it. This isn't over, he snarled. You keep saying that, but you never seem to follow through. Maybe that's your problem with women, too. He hung up on me, but I could practically hear his blood pressure spiking through the phone. The investigation at Morrison and Associates moved quickly. Eric was fired within a week, his partnership track derailed permanently. Vanessa received a formal reprimand and was reassigned to less prestigious cases. The legal community in our town was small, and gossip traveled faster than court documents. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. My next target was Eric's social life. He was active on social media, constantly posting photos of his expensive lifestyle and professional achievements. I created a fake account and started following his friends, colleagues, and family members. Then I began sharing the motel photos. Not publicly, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I sent private messages to key people in his circle. His parents, his siblings, his college buddies, his ex-girlfriends. Each message was carefully crafted to look like concerned gossip from a mutual friend. Thought you should know what Eric's been up to lately. The response was swift and devastating. Eric's social media accounts went silent as friends unfriended him and family members confronted him. His carefully cultivated image as a successful, eligible bachelor crumbled like a house of cards. Meanwhile, Vanessa was dealing with her own social fallout. Her yoga studio friends started canceling their weekly sessions. The neighborhood book club suddenly had no room for new members. Even her sister stopped calling. "People are staring at me," she complained one evening, looking haggard and exhausted. "At the grocery store, at the gas station, everyone knows." "Small towns," I said with a shrug. "People talk. You did this. You're the one spreading rumors." "I haven't told anyone anything that wasn't true." I looked up from my newspaper. "Besides, you're the one who decided to conduct your affair in public. I just made sure people knew what they were looking at." She left the room without another word, and I went back to reading the sports section. The local high school football team was having a good season. Nice to know something in town was going according to plan. The annual Founders Festival was the biggest event in our town's social calendar. Local businesses set up booths, families gathered for picnics, and the mayor gave a speech about community values and small-town pride. It was also the perfect venue for the final act of my revenge. I'd been planning this for weeks, ever since I learned that Eric would be attending with his new girlfriend, a 20-something paralegal he'd met at his new job in the next town over. Apparently, unemployment hadn't slowed down his dating life. Vanessa would be there too, representing Morrison and Associates at their booth, despite her recent demotion. She was 6 months pregnant now, showing enough that strangers were starting to ask about the baby. She'd been telling people I was the father, maintaining the fiction for as long as possible. The festival was in full swing when I arrived. Families spread across the park with blankets and picnic baskets. The smell of barbecue and funnel cake filled the air, and a local band was playing cover songs on the main stage. I spotted Eric first, standing near the beer tent with his arm around a blonde who looked young enough to be his daughter. He'd lost weight since losing his job, and his clothes looked cheaper than his usual wardrobe. Unemployment was apparently rough on his shopping budget. Vanessa was at her firm's booth, handing out promotional materials and trying to look professional, but I could see the strain in her face, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. The past few months had aged her, and the pregnancy wasn't helping. I made my way through the crowd, stopping to chat with neighbors and coworkers, playing the role of the friendly local guy everyone knew. People were polite, but I could see the questions in their eyes. They knew about the affair, the pregnancy, the separation. They were waiting to see what would happen next. The opportunity I'd been waiting for came when the mayor called for community announcements from the stage. Local business owners shared updates about expansions and new hires. The high school principal talked about the football team's winning streak. The pastor announced the church's upcoming charity drive. When the microphone was opened for general announcements, I walked up to the stage. "I'd like to say a few words," I told the mayor. "Of course, Dave. You know everyone here." I took the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces stared back at me, including Vanessa's pale, horrified expression and Eric's growing panic. Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Dave Thompson. I've lived in this town for 44 years, worked construction here for 25 years, and raised my family here. The crowd murmured politely, waiting for whatever announcement I was planning to make. I wanted to talk to you today about community values, about trust, honesty, and the importance of keeping your word. Vanessa was shaking her head frantically, trying to catch my eye, but I ignored her. 6 months ago, my wife announced she was pregnant. She asked me to get my bank account ready for our new baby. I was surprised, since I'd had a vasectomy 7 years earlier, but I figured stranger things had happened. The murmur from the crowd grew louder. People were starting to understand where this was going. It turns out the baby isn't mine. DNA tests confirmed what I already suspected. My wife has been having an affair with her coworker, Eric Patterson, the same Eric Patterson who's standing right over there by the beer tent with his new girlfriend. The crowd turned as one to stare at Eric, who had gone white as a sheet. His girlfriend was looking between him and me with growing confusion. Now, I want to be clear about something, I continued, warming to my theme. I don't blame Eric entirely. After all, my wife is a beautiful, intelligent woman. Any man would be tempted. But here's the thing about temptation. Decent people resist it. Eric started pushing through the crowd toward the stage, but several of my coworkers from the construction company stepped into his path. They weren't threatening him, just blocking his way. Eric, on the other hand, decided that sleeping with a married woman was perfectly acceptable. He came to my house for dinner, shook my hand, and complimented my wife's cooking while planning his next trip to the motel with her. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. So I thought you all should know what kind of man Eric Patterson really is. He's the kind of man who destroys families for his own pleasure. He's the kind of man who gets a woman pregnant and then tries to let her husband pay for it. He's the kind of man who, when confronted with his actions, has the nerve to act like he's the victim. Eric finally broke through the crowd and reached the stage. "You can't do this!" he shouted. "This is slander!" "Is it slander if it's true?" I asked into the microphone. "Did you or did you not have an affair with my wife? Are you or are you not the father of her unborn child?" Eric's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The truth was written all over his face. "I thought so," I said. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Eric Patterson, home wrecker, deadbeat dad, an all-around piece of human garbage." The crowd erupted. Some people were cheering, others were booing Eric, and still others were taking photos and videos with their phones. Eric's girlfriend had already disappeared, apparently deciding she didn't need this drama in her life. Eric, desperate and humiliated, did something incredibly stupid. He charged the stage trying to get at me. I was ready for him. As he climbed the steps, I stepped aside and stuck out my foot. Eric tripped and went sprawling across the stage, landing in a heap at the feet of the mayor. The crowd roared with laughter as Eric struggled to get up, his face red with embarrassment and rage. When he finally made it to his feet, he took a swing at me. Big mistake. I'd been boxing at Doug's gym for 15 years, and Eric's gym workouts hadn't prepared him for an actual fight. I ducked his wild punch and responded with a perfect right cross that caught him square on the jaw. Eric went down like a sack of cement, unconscious before he hit the stage. The crowd went wild. People were cheering, applauding, and taking pictures of Eric's unconscious form sprawled on the stage. The mayor was trying to restore order, but nobody was listening. I looked out at the crowd and spotted Vanessa, tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her pregnant belly. She looked broken, defeated, utterly humiliated. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the months of being made to feel like a fool in my own home. My sympathy evaporated. I took the microphone one last time. "Eric will be fine," I announced, as two paramedics checked on his unconscious form. "He's got a hard head, probably from all that practice banging it against motel room walls." The crowd laughed again, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was better than any revenge I could have planned. "As for my wife," I continued, looking directly at Vanessa, "I wish her and her baby all the best. I hope Eric's ready to step up and be a father, because his free ride is officially over." I handed the microphone back to the mayor and walked off the stage, the crowd parting before me like the Red Sea. People patted me on the back, shook my hand, and told me I'd done the right thing. Behind me, Eric was being loaded onto a stretcher, still unconscious, but breathing. Vanessa had disappeared, probably fleeing the scene to avoid further humiliation. I walked through the festival crowd, accepting congratulations and enjoying the sweet taste of victory. My marriage was over. My wife was exposed as a cheater, and her lover was unconscious on a stretcher. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest. And after months of lies and deception, honesty felt pretty damn good. As I reached my truck, Doug appeared beside me with 2 beers. "Hell of a speech," he said, handing me a bottle. "Hell of a day," I replied, taking a long drink. "So, what now?" I looked back at the festival, where people were still talking about what they'd witnessed. Eric was being wheeled to an ambulance while Vanessa's coworkers tried to salvage what was left of their booth. "Now?" I smiled and finished my beer. "Now I get on with my life. The real one, not the lie I've been living." Doug nodded approvingly. "Good man. You deserve better than what they put you through." "Yeah," I said, getting into my truck. "I do." As I drove away from the festival, I caught a glimpse of Eric in the ambulance, awake now but looking dazed and defeated. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen, probably already planning her next move. But I wasn't worried about their next moves anymore. I'd played my hand perfectly, and the game was over. They'd called me the villain in their twisted little drama, but maybe I was just the storm they deserved. The sun was setting as I drove home to my empty house, and for the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow.